È mio onore e piacere avere l'opportunità di introdurre qui a voi Marco Te Brömmelstroet, che è qui a raccontarci cosa ci faceva John Lennon a letto con una bicicletta. Marco è un ricercatore ma attivista, persona impegnata a tutto tondo sul tema della ciclabilità, della mobilità sostenibile urbana, è professore all'Università di Amsterdam. Ci sono molte sigle a cui contribuisce, appartiene, una è quella dell'Urban Cycling Institute, e il suo campo di lavoro accademico è intitolato all'Urban Mobility Futures. Il suo libro di riferimento, che chissà magari sarà un giorno disponibile anche in italiano, per il momento è disponibile in qualche altra lingua, tra cui l'inglese, Movement, How to Take Back Our Streets and Reclaim Our Lives. In pratica significa che abbiamo volontariamente o meno volontariamente concesso troppo spazio alle automobili, ad aggeggi che occupano lo spazio della città, sottraendolo alla qualità della vita umana, ed è su questo che Marco ci intratterrà questo pomeriggio. Grazie molte e buon divertimento.
Il linguaggio non è uno specchio della realtà. Modella profondamente ciò che vediamo e ciò che non vediamo. Inquadra i problemi che definiamo e le soluzioni che proponiamo. Il nostro linguaggio plasma la realtà. The language that we speak does not reflect reality. The language that we speak shapes reality. And I want to share with you today the power that gives you to think about your role in the transition of cities. Before I start my story, finding the answer to why John Lennon and Yoko Ono were in bed with a bicycle, I first need to get to know you. So I'm going to ask you to respond to 3 statements. You're going to respond by all standing up in the beginning. So I ask you all to stand up now. And if you disagree with the statement, you can sit down. If you agree with the statement, you keep standing up. Okay? The first statement is, we really need a mobility transition. So if you do not agree with this, you can sit down. So everybody agrees with, so you understand what I ask, right? A mobility transition is not a small change. A mobility transition is a structural, systemic change. Okay? Everybody stands. Good. Second question. I want to play an important role in this transition. If you do not want to play an important role, you can sit down. Everybody's standing up. Okay, good. It's good. But be aware, this is be honest to yourself, okay? The third question is, I think that the bicycle plays a crucial role in this. Everybody? Okay, so I have some work to do. Please sit down, because I think it's important for all of you to understand why John Lennon and Yoko Ono were in bed with a bicycle in 1969. In 1969, John Lennon and Yoko, they visited Amsterdam. And this was part of their honeymoon trip. John Lennon and Yoko Ono were just married, and they were traveling the world. And when they were traveling the world, they visited specific places: Paris, Montreal, Amsterdam, and they were also protesting. They were not gluing themselves to the road. They had a much smarter way of protesting. They stayed in their luxury hotel room for 7 days. So if you ever want to protest, take some lessons. So they were staying here, and what happened? They were protesting in bed, the famous sleep in or bed in, and people came to their room and they came to ask them questions, to say things, or to bring them all kinds of gifts. And when one of the journalists came and asked John Lennon why they were in Amsterdam, you know what his answer was? His answer was, "We're here because of the vibes, man." I think he's lying. I think he was there because his wife wanted to be there, right? That's how it works. Yoko Ono really wanted to be in Amsterdam because Amsterdam was the pivotal point of the counter movement in the 1960s. And one of the iconic pictures of time when they were in bed here was this picture, the picture with the bicycle. So why are John Lennon and Yoko Ono in bed with an old, white-painted, single-speed, sitting upright, rickety Dutch bicycle? And why is this so important for you all to understand? Because as I understood, you all want to have a mobility transition and you all want to play a role in that. So you have to understand this. We have to understand this question. And to get us started, in bed here, Yoko Ono was already thinking about the lyrics for this song. Do you recognize the song? Only 2 years later, Imagine came out, and everybody thinks it's John Lennon's song. It's not. It's Yoko Ono's song. And she was already thinking about the lyrics. So I will guide you through my story, and I will sing that song for you later, if I dare to, in this beautiful room. I will teach you a magical trick. I will give you the answer why they were in bed with a bicycle. And I will tell you that you cannot be Bobo, okay? So if I forget, please remind me in the end, somebody, that I should not forget to tell you why you cannot be Bobo, okay? All of this will make sense. I will also have to go through a bit of philosophy, because as I already started, the language that you speak is not a mirror of reality. The language that you speak defines what you see, what you do not see, what problems you identify, and what solutions you think of. So the language that you speak shapes reality, especially you. You are going to play an important role in the mobility transition, as I just learned. So the language that you speak defines the future of Torino. That's not a small thing, because we first need to understand what language does. And this is the bit of the philosophical part. It will become much more practical later. So bear with me, but this is important, because what language does is actually 3 important steps, and these are your weapons later on. Step 1 is what language does. It simplifies the world by definition. The world is incredibly complex, and we need language about, on average, between 10 and 20,000 words in a language. The Italians add sort of gestures and hands, but still, you have limited amount of words to describe complex reality. So you use language to simplify it. So you can talk about it, right? So it's inescapable. There's no way around this. You need language to simplify reality. So let's say that this evening you want to at the dinner table, you want to explain this to your partner or your kids or your friends. The best example for this are metaphors. You use metaphors all day, really. And metaphors are explicitly words that you use to explain something complex in a simpler way. This evening, I will visit Juventus Torino. And I know that I can say to anybody there that soccer is war, and they all know what I mean. Or I can say, in another venue, I can say, love is a battlefield, and they all know what I mean. Or life is a journey. Or, and this one I'm pretty sure that you all have said before, and all believe it's true, time is money, right? Time is money, ever said that? It's completely untrue. But we use the concept of money to explain to people that their time can be exchanged for my money. So your time, my money, was a very important metaphor during the Industrial Revolution to actually make everything work, right? So with metaphors, it becomes very clear that we simplify the world. But in the simplification, a second step happens, also by definition. You simplify the world, and by definition, you make choices. Okay? These choices are arbitrary, but you have to make them. Let me explain this, and I'm going to ask a response. In Italian, that's fine. I always make a mistake. I make the same mistake every time. Maybe you recognize this. I have a WhatsApp group with my neighbors. And that's already a mistake, I just realized. I have a WhatsApp group with my neighbors, and what happens there is that I do the same thing all the time. I send a picture to the app group. And of course, what you get is, well, this is not what the app group is meant for, but I like it anyway. So I just sent a picture. I sent this picture, don't ask me why. And within 5 minutes, I get a personal message by Marion. Marion is my neighbor. And Marion tells me, Marco, you did it again. You're sending me a picture. Everybody starts to talk about the picture, but I'm blind, and you know that. So I cannot see what is on the picture. Okay? So now you need to help me, because we need to send a short message to my neighbor explaining what is on the picture. So anybody. It's free. You can also speak in Italian, you can scream, whatever you want. What do we need to send Marion so she knows what's on the picture? A deer is crossing the road. Sure, yeah, thanks. Slow down. Slow down. Other ideas? In the back. Help my neighbor. What can we tell her? Yeah. The road is in the middle of the forest. Okay, very nice. Other ideas? Well, I can tell you the best one I have ever heard is a man finds back his stuffed deer. Or roadkill. The point here is that you are now in your mind using language to make choices, right? By definition, because I forced you to do that. And even if you didn't speak, your brain was trying to simplify something that is actually not that complex, but you cannot describe in full terms. And you make a choice. And the point here is, which is crucial for me, is that this is not about the good or the bad choice, but that all these choices are arbitrary. And these choices mean that you will start seeing different things, and you start seeing different problems and different solutions. So that's 2 of the 3 elements of language. Language is a necessary simplification of reality in which you make arbitrary choices. And this is always the case, okay? Remember this. It's a very important weapon. And why is it so important? That's because the 3rd element of language in your hands, and that is the most difficult word of today. I don't know if the Italian translator can translate this. It's called performativity. Language shapes the world. And I can best explain this through the example of the primeval forest. This is an example given to us by James Scott in his book, Seeing Like a State. And he says, governing is using language. If you govern, you need indicators to make decisions, to optimize things. And he says if something isn't governed, it can be very complex. He shows the example of the primeval forest. The primeval forest isn't governed by anybody. It's just there. And because of that, it serves multiple different purposes. Can you look at the forest through the eyes of a deer or a rabbit? Can you do it? Try. What you see is an ideal ecosystem to hide yourself. But now switch and look at the forest through the eyes of a wolf or fox. It's also the ideal habitat to hunt, right? It's the ideal place to build your nest if you're a bird. It's the ideal place to grow, to play, to thrive. And therefore, the primeval forest is a very rich, biodiverse ecosystem. But that changes. James Scott says it changed at the end of the 18th century because we needed something from the wood. We needed something. Do you know what? What do we need from the forest? Wood. Yeah, we need wood. Wood becomes an important resource for building and for fuel. So we need wood from the forest. So people that own a forest now want to understand, how can I simplify my forest into indicators that help me to produce the most wood for the least energy? Makes sense, right? And to do that, they ask academics to develop a new language. And of course, academics are very nice people, you know that, right? So they do it. They say, okay, we will do it. It's German academics at the time, and German academics come up with a complete new domain. It doesn't exist yet, but you can still study it now. It's called scientific forestry. And you can study scientific forestry, and you learn about a very central indicator, a very central word in scientific forestry. It's called the Normalbaum. The Normalbaum, the standard tree, right? The standard tree becomes this ideal typical word to look at a tree and think if it's actually producing the most wood for the effort you put in. And with this indicator, people that owned forests started to change their forest over time. And this is performativity. So the primeval forest, through simplifying it as a production thing, becomes the production forest. So this is the forest you can see today everywhere around the world, especially in Europe. Rows and rows and rows of standard trees. Everything else is gone. There are no bushes anymore. I dare you, next time, if you have urban desires next year, you can go out to a production forest, probably close by here somewhere, and you play hide and seek together. It's impossible. Because we chose to optimize the forest for wood production, all the other goals have disappeared. There's no rabbits here anymore. There's no foxes anymore. There's no bees anymore. There's no birds anymore. Especially small animals have gone from our forests. And the sad thing is, this forest isn't even more effective in wood production. Because through the language and the choice we made, we simplified the forest so far that we oversimplified it. And this is now the result. The production forest in Germany, in the middle of Germany, this is in the Harz, has 60% of its trees died because of one species of a bug. Not one bug, but a species, right? It's quite a small group, a large group of bugs. 60% of the wood died because we oversimplified. And not only have we destroyed all the other goals, in the process, we also destroyed the actual purpose of the forest. That's quite sad, right? And now you might be wondering, but wait a minute, I came to a talk today, not about forests, but about mobility and bikes. Okay, let's go there. Because my claim today is that exactly the same process happened on the streets of Turin. And actually the streets of every city around the world. Because in 1920, about 100 years ago, you can find on Google pictures, this one is colorized, pictures of Turin or any city that you're interested in. 100 years ago, you will find this, the primeval street, a complex ecosystem that serves multiple purposes. It isn't owned by anybody. The street is the remaining space between buildings. That's what the academics then say, right? There is no deputy mayor of mobility. There is no ministry of infrastructure. It doesn't exist. 100 years ago, all of this doesn't exist. And what you see on these pictures is you can see people trading, right? You can see people selling stuff, buying stuff in front of their house. You can see children playing everywhere on the street. It's the place where you play, in front of your door. This is Mulberry Street in Manhattan, in the middle of Little Italy. Large families, small houses. So you see that people use it as the public living room. This is where you meet each other. This is where you hang out. And of course, this is also the place where you have mobility, right? But this also changes. 100 years ago, something happens to the streets. Who knows what happened? Almost. Because if you look carefully, you can see that cars already existed in the 1920s. But something else happened. Cars combined with mass production. Okay, so the car in the 1920s was something of the elite. There were a few cars, and in the US there even was a law. It's called the red flag law. This car was so dangerous. When it entered the street, there has to be a person with a flag walking in front of it, with a red flag. But this all changes in the 1920s because suddenly everybody could own a car. The car was mass produced in the factories of Ford. And suddenly large numbers of heavy motorized vehicles entered the street as we saw before. Well, obviously that is not going to end very well. And it didn't. It ended with a mass suffering, especially of children. Large numbers of children were killed on the streets because they were completely unprepared for this mayhem and this violence happening upon them. Luckily, we already had a language for this. We were not unprepared. We had a language. And the language, I think already discussed today here, was the language of justice. And it was completely seen as completely unjust that children were killed, right? Children were without blame, 100%. Children were playing, they were unprepared. They are children, and suddenly they are killed. So nobody thought it would be a good idea to keep this from happening. Almost the entire society agreed that we should not have this new innovation on our roads. End of story, right? No. So something happened. And it's both tragic and painful, but also hopeful. Because what happened took only 10 years. Between the 1920s and 1930s, it's well discussed by Peter Norton in his book Fighting Traffic. He says that in 10 years' time, a complete new language was developed. And that language shaped the city and the streets as we know it today. That language departed from justice. And it became a language of efficiency, a language of control, and a language of the individual freedom of car drivers. With that new language, which wasn't designed by somebody, right? It sort of happened in small steps. For instance, can you think about that? Your children are dying. We all agree that they are innocent. But of course, as a parent, you would ask your schools, could you please tell our children that it's dangerous? Can you teach them how to behave more safe? Because I want them back at the end of the day. But through that process, only 10 years' time, suddenly you could say in the 1930s that children were also partly to blame for the fact that they were being killed, right? Because we told them it was dangerous. So things shifted very quickly. And they shifted in 10 years' time to become a new academic domain. And that academic domain also didn't exist, but also that domain you can study to this day. That new domain sort of was formed in a larger logic. This is Le Corbusier, and he was seen as a representative of this idea that cities themselves also needed a new language. The primeval city wasn't functioning. We needed a production city. And new scientists, urban designers looked from the top to these cities and said these cities need to function efficiently as machines. Because if people would be part of an efficient machine, everybody would be happy, right? If you know that you're efficient and that you're a part of a bigger goal, of a machine that functions, that is where people really, really, really get happy. That was the idea. And one of his core principles of Le Corbusier was death to the street, death to the street. And it meant you are efficient either at A or at B. Have you ever heard that? Everything in between is negative, right? Traveling is a derived demand. You travel to be at A or at B because that's where you're an efficient part of that machine. Optimize the machine, marginalize the human. That became the mantra, and that was shaped in this new academic domain. And that domain, at the beginning, was just a choice of language, but it solidified. The language solidified, they became guidelines, they became norms. The norms solidified into models. The models solidified into institutions. Institutions solidified into laws. The laws institutionalized further and solidified into behavior. The behavior, in the end, solidified into asphalt, steel, and concrete, our streets. And now we're stuck, because I argue that the choices of language solidified one step further. It solidified our imagination. We can no longer see that we're stuck in the way of thinking that was designed 100 years ago. So let's go back, let's try it. This is the Dutch sustainable safe intersection. And I've seen people making pictures because it's so lovely, right? Yeah, we solved it, right? The Dutch solved it. They made a system that is perfect, where everybody can go efficiently from A to B in a relatively safe manner. If I show this to Dutch people, they think it's the most boring picture, because for them it's completely normal. But let's unpack it here, because it's an important part of understanding the answer why John Lennon and Yoko Ono were in bed with a bicycle. What we see here is asphalt, steel, and concrete. But what we need to see, all of you, is the language that shaped it. So let's go back in time. 100 years ago, a new domain is going to be created. But we're all there now. easy in this room, right? 100 years ago, we're all black and white. And I have an important question in this room for you. We have a huge urgent problem. Children are being killed out there every day in Turin. We need to solve it, and I need you. We need to find a new language, a new academic domain, and we're going to start it next year after summer. We're going to start the first education at the Politecnico. It's called traffic engineering. Traffic engineering. It's a new word. You haven't heard it before. It didn't exist. We are going to create it, but it doesn't exist. So what I need from you is who are we going to ask to write the first syllabus? Who are we going to ask to make this first cohort, the first information for students that are going to be the first traffic engineers? Who is that? So who are we going to ask, please? I'm not allowed to walk in there, but in the back also. Who are we asking? Any ideas? Kids. That's a brilliant idea. But we didn't do that. Others. People who drive cars, that's a logical idea. But if you go back 100 years ago, it was a very small minority, right? So car drivers and car companies were actually a niche. We made them big. So we didn't do that either. It was also probably a bad idea, but other ideas. Other ideas. Come on, people. Children are being killed, huh? So we need some urgency. Doctors, great idea. Didn't do that either. Other ideas. We need somebody. Who? Pedestrians. That would be brilliant. But we didn't do that either. Can I tell you? Because we can do this for 45 minutes. The person we asked to write the first syllabus for traffic engineering was a water engineer. And why? Because a water engineer at that time was seen as a very, very, very important person because they just solved two other problems. They created a sewage system for cities, which created hygienic conditions for everybody. And you could say that water engineers saves more people than doctors. They created water pipeline systems to bring water to every house in the city. So it was logical to ask them, can you come and help us to develop a new language for the city? And of course, water engineer, very kind people, they said, yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we need to understand the water engineer. Who of you has ever seen Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Good luck translating that. Who of you has ever seen the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Nobody? No, I don't believe that. Yeah. Be honest. Not in real life, I mean on television. Yeah? Ninja Turtles. Ninja Turtles. Okay, so for all of you who have no clue, the Ninja Turtles are human-sized turtles. No, don't worry. Yeah. They don't exist. It's not real. But they're human-sized turtles and a human-sized rat, Splinter. And they fight for the good, right? But they live in a sewage system. So I was always wondering, how can human-sized turtles live in a sewage pipe that if you would make it efficiently, would be as small as possible, no? So if you're a water engineer, what can never happen with a sewage pipe? What is the most important thing that should never choices that we have to make? But if I'm honest, I'm going away tomorrow. So this is the choice that you yourself have to make. And I wish you all the best with that. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie a te, grazie moltissime Marco. Siamo un pochino in ritardo con il nostro programma, ma siamo direi quasi in difficoltà a lasciarti andare via perché ci sarebbero così tante cose che verrebbe voglia di discutere. Non ci stiamo proprio, direi. Sì? Io non voglio... 5? Allora, Tatiana, io sono, come dire, assolutamente pronto a concedere i 5 e anche i 10. Vedo però che chi segue è già pronto. Forse conviene che tu prenda le cuffie. C'è qualcuno che vuole fare una domanda, un'osservazione?
Thank you. Can you maybe give us a little spoiler?
Wow, I was like, wow.
Could you give us a little spoiler on the book? Some topics that are talked about? What are some possible things that we can implement in cities?
Wow. Well, my answer should be no. You have to find me an Italian publisher. Then you can only then you can see the real the treasures of the book. No, so the book is an endeavor where I discuss with a journalist, and I start basically with questions that we always start with, like why is there so much congestion? How can we solve it with bikes and da da da. And then the reader is taken by the hand by the journalist to go deeper and deeper and ask more and more questions. So the book helps you to ask better questions, like why is the street designed as it is? Who decides this? I always ask children this at school, at the elementary schools. Do you know who designs the street? Because you should. We should tell you this. It's very important because it defines your life. And they always tell me, no, I have no idea. We didn't? So who belongs the streets? And the answer that always comes, the smart kid in the room says, it's very important, so it has to be the king. Has to be. And I tell this person, I said, no, sorry, it's the traffic engineer who had an education of 3 years, and he or she is defining how your street looks. So with the book, we are hoping to give people a sort of a guide to ask these questions, to ask better questions, because I think what we try to do with the book is to show people you take public space for granted, but it's way too important for that. It's way too important for the physical, mental health of our children. It's way too important for climate. It's way too important for so many things. So the book tries to activate people and say, that's what you need to do. And that's, if I shortly can answer the second part, I think this is your assignment. If you want to be part of a transition in Turin, you need to find ways to talk to all these people that are silent, but that are not activated if you talk about parking the car or about bicycle paths. Most people are completely bored with these topics. You need to find language and problems that are also require space on the street to activate these people. So one of the challenges I would give is try to find, I don't know if somebody knows the number, how many elementary schools are there in Turin? Probably hundreds, about 100. Activate them, because they are losing. The children are losing already for decades. Activate them, and you will find that the parents will join you. You will find that the teachers will join you, because they have lost the right to roam the city in the last decades. So this is a very powerful thing to do. So the book I hope that you can use the book to help your other people in your social networks to start asking the questions that you all are already asking. That's one. And two, you need to activate those that are actually losing at the moment because they are not activated. And I think we should need a technique like this that we can give to traffic engineers, and we can translate like the questions, the real questions, right? I was thinking that would be nice, but we have a translator. Ok.
Non so se c'è ancora una domanda velocissima. Yeah. Tatiana.
In your opinion, what are the biggest barriers that stop people from switching to bicycles from cars or reducing car use?
Well, that's
in terms of, comfort maybe, or
yeah. No, I think we can make that question very complicated, and I can tell you all the academic studies, but I think it's very simple. I think the reason that most people that are currently using cars where there are alternatives, they're doing that because we subsidize their behavior. So we are not asking the people that drive a Fiat to pay for the full costs of owning and driving that Fiat. So we are subsidizing a society that they can use it and park it. So again, I don't know the numbers here, but I found that in the Netherlands, we have about 10 million cars. It's likely even higher per capita than in Italy, by the way, or similar at least. 10 million cars. We have 30 million parking spots. And then we ask ourselves, why are people using cars? Well, because we make it incredibly simple and easy for them. Right? We are offering free cigarettes for everybody. And then we ask questions like, why are people not stopping with smoking? Well, so we've tried for decades, and Turin is trying to make alternatives nicer and to make nicer bikes and to make nicer trams and to make nicer everything. But very seldomly we are talking about, let's take away the subsidies for people that are currently using cars for less than 3-kilometer trips in the city, for instance. That should not be viable, right? So the short answer, I really think, is that. And again, to go back to, because then people say, well, that's an easy answer from an academic, but politically, it's suicide. No, it's not. I have the evidence. It started in Groningen, then it went to Ljubljana, then Pontevedra, then Ghent, and now last week in Paris, the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, was re-elected after saying, I will fix the city for you, which partly means that we will reduce all the freedoms of car drivers. Suicide. No, she was re-elected. She got a 6-year mandate, and she's doing it right now. And I can assure you, because we've known this, in 6 years later, nobody wants to go back. So we need to stop the subsidies, and we need bold politicians. And to get there, to go back to this first question, we need to offer them new narratives, which is not about hating cars or making it less for cars or less this or less that. No, it's really about Turin can be the first Italian city where children from the age of 8 regain their right to be autonomous. Who is against that? Tell me, who is against that? Who in political government in Turin hates children? Right? It's easy to hate cyclists. It's really easy. It's really hard to hate children politically. So use that. The solutions are simple. The political, so it's not a technological problem, it's a political problem. And the political problem you can solve by using language to your advantage. And I really hope that you will all do that.
In your vision, there are two players, the cars and the bicycles. But what about a third player that is public transport? What is the role?
Oh, no, if I made that impression, it's not true. I don't think that's the two players. I think the bicycle was a symbolic power to regain the streets, but not for bikes, but for people. Because I think if you reduce the world into modes of transport, even public transport, cars, pedestrians, cyclists, mobility as a service, you're still missing the most valuable part, which is just people being, right? The word pedestrian was invented by traffic engineers, because otherwise humans wouldn't fit in their logic. We need to break out of that logic, because in that logic, we are not solving the problems. So also not with public transport, not with bikes, not with cars. The only way out of this, that's Pirschig, right? Is to deny the logic of traffic engineering. We need to stop it. And I think good public transport companies already do this by showing that public transport is not transport, it's public space. But in public transport, it's interesting, not because it's faster or cheaper or more comfortable. It's interesting because it's adventurous. It will make you meet other people. And if we focus on that, I think we are regaining some of the human qualities of our cities. If we just see it as competition between modes, we are playing the same game, and we will never win. So we should not engage in chess. We should flip the board.